All right, thank you. And maybe we'll start as the recording is, as you've heard, that we'll be recording the webinar and also, and also live streaming it on YouTube. So for others who might want to join and listen in. But yeah, we're very prompt on time, so that's good. All right, shall we kick off and right on the hour? So I'll just introduce, thank you everyone for joining this webinar. That's joining forces, the Hot Tech and Innovation Working Group and Community Working Group. There was a specific, ask and really interest from all of you, hope all of you joining, talking about the different perspectives on AI-assisted mapping in OpenStreetMap. So thank you for joining, and I'll hand over to Anne, who will be facilitating today's session. So over to you, Anne.
Thank you so much, Fatia, and thank you so much to both the Hot Tech and Innovation Working Group and the Community Working Group for the invitation to really help co-facilitate this really interesting and I think really topical discussion around AI-assisted mapping in OSM. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a community manager of a project called The Turing Way, which is an open knowledge project around data science and AI. But before becoming a community manager, I was a researcher in and around the OpenStreetMap ecosystem and spent a number of years with folks within the community, interviewing folks, asking people about how they interact with AI systems, how they interact with OSM data, and a lot of the way that I think about and work around data has really been informed by you all as mappers. And so with that, it's really an honor to be together with folks here to talk more about this topic. So to get us started, I thought that we could maybe, get started with maybe a reflection from all of you and a quick check-in. I'm putting a link into the chat of a shared document called a Padlet, and invite you starting on line 6, if you would like, to maybe add your name, the location you're joining from. And we had a question that we were really interested in asking folks here before passing off the mic to our panelists of, what is the first thing that comes to mind for you when you hear this kind of phrase AI and open mapping? Because given the kind of hype and the interest that we have around artificial intelligence currently, you might have heard these narratives around ChatGPT. What does AI and open mapping mean to you, and what does that make you think of? We'll take maybe a minute or so for folks to add the link here before getting started. I can add a couple of more lines on the pad. I feel like I should have had some music prepared in the background. So I share this pad so we can have some background music while folks are adding their thoughts. Really interesting, some things coming up here around spatial data science. A lot of folks adding their names to get started though. And I will say apologies if the pad isn't loading properly. Maybe it's getting overwhelmed by the number of folks accessing it at the same time. So maybe we can leave it open for a while for folks to be able to sign in as they will. There might be, yes, a capacity limit, maybe. Definitely, as Fatia was saying, if you're having issues, definitely feel free to add any thoughts you might have in the chat, and we can archive that later on. And I will double post the question on the pad here in the chat. It'll take maybe a minute or so just to give folks time to be able to write their thoughts. Really interesting reflections here around increased opportunities to improve the map, more detailed, Facebook's AI mapping editing software, efficiency, simplicity, rapid, definitely. Cool. And big data, satellite imagery. I think one thing that's becoming quite clear in how people are responding to this question of like what they think of when they hear AI and open mapping is really how differently people are thinking about the same concepts. And so likely come out in our discussion later on as well, because people aren't thinking of the same thing when it comes to AI. Okay, maybe we can I was going to say maybe we can move on, but there are so many interesting reflections coming in. AI and open mapping, advanced mapping and time saving, global community benefiting from data available from around the world. Definitely. And we'll unpack that a little bit later on. So thank you all so much. Please feel free to put your reflections into the chat as we continue on. But a little bit about the community working group. It's a group that is dedicated to the support and engagement of community groups and contributors that aim to leverage OpenStreetMap data and tools for positive social and development. So positive social, humanitarian, and development impact. You can learn more about them on the OSM wiki, the link of which is here, and I will also drop that into the chat in case you're interested in learning more. Next slide, please. And the Tech and Innovation Working Group is a welcoming and inclusive open space to connect, contribute, collaborate, innovate, and share ideas for geospatial tech for humanitarian purposes. And again, I will share the link in the chat here in case you're interested in getting involved. This very special collaboration between these two groups. So on to the next slide. Couple of reminders and house rules. This webinar is currently being live streamed via YouTube and is being recorded on the Hot OSM YouTube channel. We also encourage you all to abide with the Hot Code of Conduct, also linked here. As I say in my own community as well as in any call that I help to co-facilitate, but it's very important to be welcoming, respectful, to be careful in how you phrase words and your tones, but also when disagreement happens, when friction happens, very important to try and understand why and to kind of always try to approach each other from a space of, with an intention to mutually understand each other. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the structure for this seminar, as well as the one happening later today, is that we'll go through a series of presentations by Radim, Milan, and Benny, and then we'll pass the mic to Victor Sunday, and then we will hear from Sine as well, which will talk about kind of various different discussions, research projects around this topic of AI and how it's used within OpenStreetMap. And then we'll have more or less a moderated discussion between folks who have spoken, but also really hoping to learn from you all in the audience as well. And we do have an optional 30 minutes after this kind of hour-long timeline for people to be able to ask questions, kind of expanding as we need to into further time. And then feel free to, of course, share any reflections you might have using the hashtags open mapping, open source tools, and AI-assisted mapping in any media site you might like to. Next slide, please. So just to review, we have today Radim Stampak, who is an assistant professor at the Department of Geography in the Faculty of Science at Maastricht University. We have Milan Fila, who's also a researcher at Maastricht University, along with Benjamin Herford at the Heidelberg Institute for Geoinformation. And we also have Victor Sunday in Geography and Environmental Management at the University of Port Harcourt, as well as myself moderating the discussion coming from the Alan Turing Institute and the Turing Way Project as a community manager of another community that works in and around AI-related topics. Okay, so with that, you've had a solid 10 minutes of me speaking, so I will, if we could go on to the next slide, I will pass on the mic to Radim, Milan, and Benjamin. On to you all.
So, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for your attention. This presentation was prepared by our team, me and my colleague Milan Fila. We are from Masaryk University Brno, and we cooperated with Benjamin Herford, which is from Heidelberg Institute for Geoinformation Technology. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our research topic is, or research question is, using of buildings and roads prepared by artificial intelligence for humanitarian and OpenStreetMap mapping. Our questions are, is mapping faster with artificial intelligence? Is quality of mapped data better? Or is there difference between beginners and experienced mappers? Probably, as you know, Rapid Editor exists, which is very similar to popular ID Editor and allows mapping with AI features. And also popular JOSM editor has his plugin, which is called Map with AI. And both Rapid and JOSM with editor with plugin offer mappers to use some pre-prepared roads and buildings, which were pre-prepared by AI intelligence. Buildings are pre-prepared by Microsoft and partly also by Google and Esri, and roads are pre-prepared by Meta. Next slide, please. Well, this is nothing totally new. First, AI pre-prepared roads were pre-prepared even in 2017. So even nowadays, we can see some global results about using of AI objects. So this is topic for Milan Fila. So I can give the speech to him right now. Milan.
Thank you very much, Radim. Yeah, it looks very simple. Let's say we did exploratory analysis about the use of AI buildings from continent perspective, and most numerous is North Central America and Africa, and we performed a comparison of absolute and relative numbers. In North Central America, we can see the highest relative and absolute numbers in the USA. And in Africa, the highest relative numbers are in Kenya, also with high absolute numbers. In Sudan, there are high relative numbers, but we can see low absolute numbers. So that's the comparison. And high relative numbers are also in Nigeria. Maybe next slide. Yeah, we did the same analysis with AI roads, but with the land. And in Asia, we can see the highest relative and absolute numbers in India and Vietnam. And in Africa, the highest relative and absolute numbers are in Tanzania. And that's the question, why these states? Because yeah, we've got to know there took place some mapathons and the communities used AI data. But yeah, that's the question. Why AI data? Because maybe there are less members of in the community, so it could be maybe helpful for them. That's the question. So maybe Radim, you can continue. The floor is yours.
Okay, next slide, please. So we did some experiments about comparison of mapping buildings and roads using ID and Rapid Editor, and results are quite interesting. In case of buildings, we can say that Rapid is statistically significantly better than ID Editor, both in number and of mapped buildings and also in proportion of correctly mapped buildings. And both experienced mappers and beginners have higher proportion of correctly mapped buildings in a Rapid Editor. And also feedback from our mappers. They told us that mapping of buildings in a Rapid Editor is easier for them. Okay, fine. Next slide, please. On the opposite way, when we did the same, or not same, but very similar experiment for roads, we found that, yes, 2 times more roads were mapped in Rapid Editor, but 3 times more errors were produced in Rapid Editor. So that's not very effective mapping when you focus about quality. And it's the same for both beginners and more experienced mappers, and also feedback from our participants of our experiments were that mapping of roads in a Rapid Editor is more difficult than in ID Editor, and participants were not convinced about the usefulness of mapping with AI. Next, please.
Oh, and this is a slide that I have added.
Okay.
Sorry, Radim.
So
before we go to the summary, I was just adding one slide in kind of where might this matter, right? So on the map you can see kind of almost all big cities in the world, and the size of the circle kind of shows you how many people live in that city, and the color represents how many buildings are actually mapped. So how completely mapped are buildings in that city. And so why I was interested to kind of put this together with the AI assisted mapping is that the places where currently there are not all buildings mapped, or where we could say maybe buildings are missing, maybe these places are also the places affected most by AI assisted mapping. So for instance, you see that for many cities in Western Europe, so close to Heidelberg, where I'm living, the completeness of the buildings is already rather high. So probably here we will not see many buildings added to OpenStreetMap which come from AI assisted mapping. You see also many other places in countries in Africa or Southeast Asia, right, where there are also a lot of buildings already completely mapped. But at the same time, we might need to take a look at the places where buildings are missing a lot. Yeah, and my assumption was, okay, these places might be most affected by AI assisted mapping. And I think the question why we also have this webinar here, I reached out to the HOTS community team first and asked, hey, what do we do about it? Or is there a perspective from the communities on this? So I cannot tell you if it's good or bad. I just see, okay, we might see a lot of AI assisted mapping in these places. What do the communities, what do the local mappers think about it? And I hope that later on we can get to that point. That's why I was adding the slide in here. And sorry, Radim, for disrupting a bit your line here, but I think it leads over to the next slide where we have the summary, and then you can continue again, Radim. Sorry.
Well, it wasn't really disrupting. Now, I'm very glad that because this was very perfect slide. So, as you can see, that we have different results in case of buildings and roads. Probably it means that there are differences between mappers, between various groups of mappers, between various regions. It means that usefulness of AI-assisted tools is very individual. And as Benny told, there are some special place in the world where AI could be probably more useful than in other parts of the world. So the discussion is not started yet, but we want to hear from you. What is your opinion? Do you have some experience with mapping, with buildings and roads prepared by artificial intelligence? Do you think that this mapping could be useful for your local community? And what is more important for your community? Faster mapping at the cost of more errors, or better quality at the cost of slower speed of mapping? Thank you. And next slide, please. Well, this is the end of presentation. So thank you for your attention, but also thank you for your feedback about using of AI-assisted tools. Yes, I think end of. Thank you.
Thank you three so much. A lot of reflections and questions, I think, from every single one of your slides that will definitely come up later on after all the presentations. But I think next I can pass the mic to Victor to present his perspectives on AI-assisted mapping in OSM.
Yeah, thank you very much, Anne. Yeah, Victor Sunday is my name. I'm a lecturer at Geography and Environmental Management, University of Nigeria, University of Port Harcourt, Nigeria. I'm also the National Coordinator of Unique Mappers Network Nigeria, the OSM community leader in Nigeria. I think this is a very interesting section, and we look forward to hearing from all our attendees on their perspective on AI and OSM. But then I want to also, in addition to the presentations already made, to categorically say that AI actually improve speed effectively, but it requires experience for efficiency and data quality. This is because prior to the introduction of AI, the RAP ID, the just some map with AI, you find out that it's just a simple tool of ID editor, and then you go on board and you take time to digitize the node, and then you round it up, you square, and so on. But then you come over to AI and you see where there's a prediction of the features that you are supposed to map. And so it requires carefulness in order to drive efficiency and data quality, especially in a complex environment. Especially here in Africa and Nigeria, you discover that when you go into a project with that is default with AI to RAP ID map, just some map with AI, you discover that it might give you a prediction of 3 canopies as round holes. It will give you a prediction of sand dunes as round holes. And that is exactly where the human factor comes in, because you now need to take time to do what? To do the correction, align them properly, and so on. But once you log in, it automatically gives you whatever that seems to be a feature, either as a building or a road, and then it gives you, and then you begin to take time to take care of that. So prior experience is actually required with ID editor in order to improve efficiency. For us in OSM community, I think it's not it's quite good that when we are introducing a newbie into the OSM mapping, you first of all start with the ID editor. And by the time you run through ID editor, and that helps you to understand the features, understands what image to use and so on, then you can now move over to using ID editor. Yes, mapping with AI actually saves time, and it provides a project delivery for humanitarian response. Because when you come to, oh, we want to quickly get the possible futures, maybe real time, and because you are interested in real-time mapping, yeah, AI, it's very, very good. AI mapping is very, very good for project delivery, because it will also give you a huge turnout of edits by volunteers over a short time, over a short period of time. Yeah, for us, I think prior to the introduction of the AI, you find out that our volunteers turns out, edits maybe just within a period of maybe 1 month and so on. You see that it might be less than 100,000, less than 10,000 edits. But immediately you had the introduction of AI, the RAP ID, just some map with AI, you see an individual turning out huge turnout of edits, buildings, and so on. For us, our Unique Mappers network, I know before the AI, we just had maybe between 1 million edits on the leaders board of Missing Map. But immediately after the introduction of the AI, just within the last 1 year, if you check our leaders board, the Missing Map, Unique Mappers, you can see that we have just about 2.1 million. And just in 1 year, we were able to turn out more than 1 million building footprints. And that's as a result of the testing of AI in Nigeria between last year and currently. And so it does not allow beginner and advanced level same pace. What do I mean by that? When you come into a mappathon and you want to look at the pace at which an advanced mapper and the beginner mapper moves, and then maybe you want to provide a motivation, you discover that you might not really place them at the same level. And so you will need to, give them different assessment, because the pace at which the beginner mapper is going using ID editor, and then maybe an advanced mapper is going using AI tool, wouldn't be the same, because and you also discover that the beginner mapper actually is doing his or her best and then providing the efficiency, and then the same thing with the advanced mapper. So it triggers, actually AI mapping triggers a motivation for community participation in OSM mapping, and improves mapping experience and level. We want to hear from everyone concerning this, but that's my thought about AI and the OSM. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Also, so many questions, I think, about the reflections that you've seen within your community as well, and that I think can be expanded more broadly into, I think, questions that everyone has around these tools. And also very interesting to see how it affects both the experience of individual mappers as well as the kind of like broader questions around efficiency and data quality. Again, hopefully to dig in more later on. And I think to close off our series of speed talks, I'll pass it on to Sine. Oh no, it looks like Sine is unable to turn on her microphone at the moment. And folks, while I wish that I could talk to these slides, I absolutely could not. So I may be filling the space with words as much as possible before someone else could step in. Katja,
yes, I would try. And I would actually, we wouldn't want to focus too much on this because we really want to hear from you. But this slides, and we can share the slides afterwards, was, you know, a lot of people have questions about AI, and in the Hot Tech and Innovation Working Group, we heard some of those perspectives. So we've asked some questions. So we just wanted to tease a few things, which I will try and do in 1 or 2 minutes. And then... Oh,
hi, Katja, it's working now.
Right,
I'm so sorry.
Wonderful. Over to you.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, like Katja was saying, let's not focus too much on this, but we figured it could be interesting to just add on to the conversation some of the things that we have heard from many of you who's taken part and been very enthusiastic about some of the experiments around AI system mapping. And I think I'll just drop in. I think most of you know, and for those of you who do not know, we are experimenting with local models. And this is based on, you'll see also a timeline in the link that I just sent. The hypothesis we have been working around is how well does local AI models perform compared to universal ones that we see in, for instance, Meta's and Microsoft's. So as an add-on to the work that we're trying to do and experiment with FAIR, we wanted to start a little bit early, also hearing from people in the community. And so we asked a few questions a couple of months ago, and especially after some of the experiences with data quality in the aftermath of the earthquake in Syria and Turkey. And just very, very brief summary of what was being said. When we asked what are some of the key challenges with AI system mapping seen from your perspective today, and accuracy, data quality was definitely one of the most frequent replies, everything from bad predictions to predicting buildings in informal settlements, so buildings that are perhaps not shaped in the way that we see in the Western world, for instance. The other thing that I found very valuable and interesting was the question around how can community help improve these models. You know, you have, I think, through these anonymous Mentimeters, we saw some distrust in AI today, but also a little bit of a leaning forward and asking, how can we help improve this? And some of the concerns that was also voiced here was perhaps building capacity around what AI actually does, how it looks like, you know, from the very beginning to the very end. That whole workflow will be important moving forward. So that was some of the challenges. Thank you. We asked again also, in your opinion, how should AI be assisting OSM and open mapping community? And I think there's two central key takeaways from that question that we saw, and that is AI system mapping should be for people, not instead of people. So there's, you know, something around simplifying processes that really stood out, whether that is, you know, supporting mappers with tagging, automating tasks, identifying validation issues, and so on. There was another interesting takeaway here, and that is what happens next. We have been focusing on buildings and roads. What about, for instance, natural features? That was also something that popped up. And I think this just really shows how valuable it is to keep on having a temperature check in the communities on what makes sense for you, especially with the fast development of AI and technology in general, as we see right now. All right, last slide. This one, a few statements. What is your view? I think based on this, you can see that not many are necessarily actively using AI tools for mapping, but there was quite a high sense of AI as an opportunity and potentially useful. And then also supporting free and open source AI. That's going to be interesting to follow. So that was a little bit of an overview of what we have heard so far. Again, the link that I dropped in the chat, you will see a timeline of some of the research that we have been doing since 3 years back. And do reach out. Umran, who is the product owner of FAIR, is in this call as well. So feel free to engage in the chat. Over to you, Anne. Thank you.
Thank you, Sneh. I feel like we could spend so much more time on the knowledge and feedback that you'd gathered through those Mentimeter surveys. Super, super interesting. And I think maybe kind of to bring us back into the collective, I had maybe one question for each of you all, like a follow-up kind of based off of your presentations, and then maybe a more general question more broadly. Something that I'd really maybe wanted to emphasize here, kind of looking through the notes and the reflections that people have put into both the chat as well as the pad around, this broader question that was asked around, like, what comes to mind when you think what comes to mind when you hear AI and open mapping, is really almost a separate question from what comes to mind when you think of AI assisted mapping, because OpenStreetMap data has been involved in discussions around AI for a long time already, in the sense that OpenStreetMap data as such has already been used after the data has been produced. In the case of road detection algorithms, for example, it's used outside of the community context as very much a data set that's within already the AI, kind of broader AI ecosystem. But that's actually, as our presenters really showed, almost separate from AI assisted mapping as a practice, meaning like how do we use AI tools, automation more broadly in order to do the mapping process and to contribute to this data set in the first place. So maybe that's one kind of distinguishing separation that I'll make here. But really, to kind of go back to our 3 really excellent presentations, maybe one question that came to mind for you already, Milan and Benjamin, is really a question around how do you define influence? And yeah, we'll start with that first. How do you define influence? And with this kind of, with the way in which Rapid is used now, how has that changed over time? I don't know which of the 3 of you would like to respond first. I see you, Benjamin, you unmuted.
Yeah, I wanted to ask who wants to go first, just to get the question right, and maybe we can answer it together. So you mean how do we define the influence of AI on mapping, right? That is what we are aiming at, and how this changed over time.
Yes.
Okay, nice. I can give it a start. I think Milan's analysis exactly points into that direction. I would say maybe from how OSM has evolved over the past years, it's like initially we had some big companies experimenting with it, with workflows that use AI assisted mapping. I think at the moment we are kind of, it's not yet a common practice, so it's still people who like to experiment that maybe use Rapid, but it's not really integrated into our larger mapping workflows. I think there are a few attempts, like using it for disaster wind spots mapping in the hot task manager, but I would say still our main approach towards mapping is manual, right? Like motivate the volunteers, get them on board and do the mapping by hand. More and more people try to find out what AI assisted mapping can deliver. But yeah, I think this is the thing where we are looking in the future is about, we see it's raising, like the influence is getting bigger. I think overall, still today, in most of the places, as you've seen on Milan's map, it's rather low. So a few % only on the entire building stock or entire road network length. But I think it will be increasing a lot. And maybe that's over to you, Milan, and a bit more about your result, because you did also the temporal aspect on it, right?
Yeah, thank you very much, Bene. It was a good point. Yeah, because AI data started about 2018 in Asia, I think, and 2019, let's say. And it was, as Benny said, it's getting more, let's say, useful for communities. But yeah, that's the question, if it's faster, but if it saves the quality, data quality. And we are performing another analysis, and we have big data, but it's still in processing, and we will see how it will emerge. And yeah, so yeah, I think most of the bullet points were told. So yeah.
Thanks so much, Milan and Vachulen. I think maybe before moving on to this second question, I don't know if Radim, if you'd wanted to chime in at all.
So, what about experiences? I don't know how many people in chat answered that they have experiences. I see that some of them. The question is if they really use it in classic mapathons, or if it was only some special mapathons for AI. The question is if we can efficiently use Rapid Editor and just with plugin on our classic mapathons, missing mapathons, because our biggest problem is that as a community, that we have not enough validators, and using AI features makes mapping faster, but it means that the bottleneck of not enough validators are even more problematic than before.
Maybe this is a good point about the influence of AI-assisted mapping, to say it might help us and it will have a big influence, but it also actually makes a need for more experienced mappers. And this is a bit of a contradiction here, right? So you are faster, but only if you are experienced. But I've seen it just in the chat. How do we build the experience in the first place? I think this is not clear.
Exactly.
That tension then between like the rise of the influence of AI systems, that has been a long time coming, right? Like folks have been talking around the development of, for example, MapSwipe years and years ago. I think 2019 was when it first started being reported as such. Like we've really seen the discourse kind of accelerate, especially in this year as ChatGPT has really taken hold and people are speaking much more about AI more broadly, which kind of influences the discourse and how we think about AI within OpenStreetMap. And this actually, I think this question that you brought up, Benjamin, and also Ralph in the chat around like who does the verification, or who is a part of, like, what is the role of experience mappers and human mapping with relationship to AI assisted mapping, meaning the more data that is produced by automated systems, what is the role of human mappers of all of this? And Ralph is really identifying that we need more kind of people involved in the equation, right? And many studies around AI systems more broadly have really shown that automated systems don't exist in a vacuum, meaning the role of data cleaners, the role of folks that are like cleaning data sets, that are ensuring that they can be used by systems in the first place, create a whole new type of work that we're also seeing within OpenStreetMap. And this is actually tied to a follow-up question that I'd had for Victor around kind of two things. One was, where do you think this kind of burden of responsibility around cleaning data sets, as well as helping with like human-assisted mapping or training volunteers to reach this more advanced level, how have you seen that happen in your community? Meaning, have you seen more folks be able to become advanced mappers, or has it become difficult to have that happen? Victor may not be in the chat here.
It's a connectivity issue or something.
Oh, no.
But it doesn't seem.
Well, if he's able to join again, then I'll throw that question back at him. But maybe actually then this also ties to a follow-up question to Sine before we expand out into the wider group here. Sine, what is required when you were talking about this tension between building a localized like AI assisted mapping system as opposed to a global version? What is required for both of these systems? What infrastructure is needed for a local system as opposed to a global system?
I would actually, can you hear me, Anne? Yeah,
yes,
okay, good.
Can.
I would actually, I would like to give the word to Omran. He's in the room. I think this is a good forum for him also to talk around this. I often take the word here, but Omran, do you want to tap into this? Inviting some more voices into the conversation.
Question is, can Omran unmute himself?
Yeah, that's a good. Just
hello,
checking.
hello. Yes.
Can
you hear me now?
excellent.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think I got that access. Yeah. Thank you, Sene. Actually, that idea came after a couple of research and an engagement with a community member called Christopher at the Maximilian Institute of Technology in Germany, with association with the DLR, the German Aerospace Center. At that research, the researchers tried to create minor models or localized models based on imagery, local imagery, and they used OpenStreetMap, Open Aerial Map imagery at that point because of the license. And the results showed there that like fine-tuned models would be somehow performing better in those specific areas. So somehow the big models are biased toward the local imagery. And then when we use the local imageries, it showed like better performance. I would say like we didn't use like massive amount of data in that research, but using a couple imagery locations from like Kenya and like specifically in the priority countries of HOT, showed that like local models are performing much better than a global one. Now, at that point, we didn't have the segment anything model. That was like a research in 2021. And in those 2 years, everything has changed. A lot of new research became available. Also, the RAMP model became released after that. They did a global research and big project where they use like around 80 giga of open imagery, open data, and like the open imagery and open data from OSM and other also sources. That's where we get that idea, and we're trying still to experiment to bring that ability to end users with a human in the loop to be able to train their own models. We don't focus on the pre-prepared data, although like I think Radem research and Milan research were in the same period where we are coordinating that research also. So in Radem and like the Mazari research, they use the rapid data, which is coming from Microsoft and Facebook. open data, where the other research is more focused on preparing that data from the models that are created. And this is where we came for that idea. And now we're still experimenting, although we're limiting the scope to be like very specific on building detection. And we're exploring, as Fanny mentioned, of how we can expand that to like different features. I noticed in the chat also someone asking about trees detections, bond detections, with the coordination also with the humanitarian OpenStreetMap, like the hubs in the regions. There is also other factors of interest, like related to climate change, to deforestation, and other impact areas. And this is where we are. I think Sunny already shared also the link for the presentation, where we have a timeline. We're still trying to include currently a feedback loop, meaning after you check the AI features and predictions, how to feed back to improve the quality of the models and increase the accuracy of it, rather than like what we have currently in Rabbit. If you have a feedback or you ignore the feature, that doesn't go back to increase the model until the producers of the data rerun their model on maybe a different imagery or a new imagery. Also, I noticed that in the chat, someone mentioned the imagery used normally in predictive features are always changing, and like everything is changing on the ground, especially when there is a movement, when there is a refugees moving, new camps are being built, and that's like changes in a very high frequency in compare with the mapping movement. Sorry, I took a lot of time. Back to you, Anne.
Amazing, Omran. It's incredible to learn more about that work. And I think what you were saying about this notion that people can create their own models, like what would actually be needed in order to create create systems that are customized and made for local communities is a really radical one in a lot of ways, as you all know. And I think maybe then to kind of expand outward into all the folks here, because you have so much like expertise and experience with folks that are in this room, is maybe to ask you all the question, if you want to put your answers in both the chat or in the pad, is, you know, what comes to mind for you, or what would be needed in order to have a kind of localized deployment of AI in your region, in your space. And that question is also worded slightly differently, but also in the pad starting on line 71.
There's a hand raised, I think, here.
I don't see any hands raised currently. Ralph, if you'd like to unmute.
Yes, hi everyone. Let me first introduce myself, Ralph Ayton. I am the lead for the top validator team. I manage and train them for HOT. I have been a cartographer all my life. For the past 50 years, I have watched the computers trying to find some way of being able to draw maps. And I am still asking the question, if I can do it, why can't the machine do it? Because I'm still waiting for a good way for them to produce maps. First of all, let me correct something. The machine-generated data is using the wrong process. There is a lot of information out there that is surveyed and correctly dated, but we're not using that. We're using auto-corrected satellite imagery for a lot of this information. And as we know, each time that the new data comes out, roads that don't align with it, buildings are offset from it. This is how inaccurate satellite data is. If we want really good, reliable data that we can download onto OpenStreetMap, we need to find an accurate source to start with, not an inaccurate one. As my validators say, garbage in, garbage out. It's as good as that. When you tag AI onto it, people expect it to be intelligent and therefore will willy-nilly follow it, except for the handful of really very experienced mappers. Most people would defer to something that's called AI as being expected to be accurate. It's not. So that was why I raised the question about when is AI only machine-generated raw data and when is it actually AI? So I will pass that back to you with that. I did ask a question when they produced the first complete road coverage of a country, and I said there are inherent details in this. Is there any way that you could go back into the program, retweet it, and just correct those? And I was told, no, there isn't. Unless they run the whole thing again with the program rewritten, there was no way of correcting it. Humans can correct individual roads if they're incorrect, but this complete country road data was dumped in our lap and said, that's what you've got, play around with it yourselves. Rather than saying, right, go back to the table and redo it. So we're looking at a conflict of interests here in the sense that people want to promote AI. I am not against AI. There are very, very useful ways of using AI, but I don't think the programmers that are programming the AI have the same knowledge and experience of the people who actually create the things that they are trying to create. As a cartographer, I am still waiting for a machine to produce a good map. Back to you.
Ralph, what an incredible mic drop in the sense that I think you bring up so many questions that are really topical, meaning, and maybe this is actually something that we can open up to the wider floor here to folks here, is really to ask you all, who bears that burden of responsibility for maintaining models and improving data sets? As these models improve, as you were saying, Ralph, like this mass upload of data, as I remember a very early version of that being in Thailand, for example, where mass generated data did cause a huge conflict that like completely affected the communities there and the mappers there. But they really found that what they were doing was correcting a mass data set individually that had just been completely shifted over time. And I think that being one, of course, only one example. So maybe a question for the chat or the pad, and for anyone that would like to chime in here, is who should be doing that data correction? And who bears that burden of maintenance and data cleaning?
So we have another hand raised, and then I think in 3 minutes, maybe we finish kind of the formal 1 hour, and then I'm sure people stay. But I think, Safiani, I think you had your hands raised.
On to you, Safiana.
Thank you for everyone. I think when we look at the issues of AI, more especially, let me relate it to our African region. The issue of digital mapping in the African region is one of the most difficult issues that we still face nowadays, because most of our local communities, they are still looking at digital mapping as a new inventory, while the world has shifting from that digital mapping to AI technology. But the issue, I think I want to add to one of the contributors there that said, if we are trying to solve the problem of inaccuracy of AI technology in solving or in mapping issues, we should use experience mapper attached to that locality. How are we going to solve that problem? Like in Africa, you should use somebody with the knowledge of that particular environment and experience with understanding of that particular environment. For instance, when you now invite somebody from the foreign expertise to come and handle the issue of Africa, like when doing on the ground truthing analysis to ascertain the accuracy of data that you're using, that will now become a problem. So I think one of the major challenges that we need to impute here, we should try as much as possible to impart the knowledge to the local experience mapper in our region that have the understanding of the environment. I think that can solve the problem of AI data, because the digital mapping or the mapping issue relies on the accuracy of what we are doing. If we are doing a map without accuracy, it's better to plan without data than planning with wrong data. When you plan with wrong data, it will lead you nowhere. But when you are planning with a data that has no accuracy, you are mapping rubbish. So I think it's better for us to solve it with the experienced digital mapper within our community. And two, AI is a new technology. Like I said before, that still digital mapping using ArcGIS and others still look new to most of our people in the local community. How is this can be able to solve the problem? We should try to look at how is it these open source AI technology can be able to solve the issues of Africa by trying to see how we can minimize its errors in solving the problem in mapping. I think that's my contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Safiyanu. And I think that actually, in many ways, concludes this first hour of our discussion together. I'm going to pass it on to Petya, or maybe you can share here that we would love to hear your feedback on this kind of format and experimentation, with adding some like written opportunities to be able to reflect here, as well as in the chat, which you can add to the pad. Starting on line 10, we have really just an ask for any feedback you might have. But this officially concludes the first hour of this shared session and collaboration between the community working group and the Hot Tech and Innovation working group meeting. And if anyone wants to stay on for the next 30 minutes to continue the discussion, you're totally free to, but I'll pass it on to Petya to share the next slide.
Yeah, again, just wanted to say thank you, and thank you, Anne, for facilitating. I think it's such an engaging discussion, so I hope most of you can stay for another 30 minutes. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, we'll share on Lumio. You can keep using the pad to share feedback about the webinar. Sorry. So share your feedback, keep in touch. We'll make sure your insights are captured. So if you cannot stay the next half an hour, there will be virtual spaces in which we can continue this conversation. And very brief intro about the next community working group webinar. So you can see here on the slides, just a little a teaser, and I'm sure Benedicta will share more and you'll hear more on that. But no, huge thanks to all the panelists, to Anne for facilitating. And yeah, that's not the end. If you have more time to stay, we're going back into the discussion, but just wanted to be aware of people's time. But yeah, so thanks to those of you who joined and those who are staying. Let's go back to more discussion. So I'll go back again to that slide, Anne. Thank you.
Cool, thank you, Petya. And I'm wondering, actually, at this point, do we have do we turn off the recording as well? Or do we leave it open as is?
I think that's when maybe Geoffrey will be able to tell me more on this.
I'll stop the recording now, and
yes,
also the
perfect.
YouTube.
Thank you.